Can I just say, I want to circle back to the concluding slides, both from Sarah and Tom. And Tom, thank you for getting through 24 slides in 10 minutes. That's a pretty remarkable achievement in itself. But there was something you touched on, which I think is particularly important in terms of education is not just for school children. And if I could just give some context here, I mean, I've been sitting in my third bedroom since March the 10th, 2020, and I've noticed the world change in front of me. And the change is fundamentally that we've got distributed networks of homeschooling, we've got distributed networks of kids not going back to university or college, we've got distributed networks of enterprise, of people not necessarily returning to the workplace. And I see that as an opportunity, not as necessarily a problem. And in the areas that I spend my time working in, I'm looking at blockchain in particular and digital identity. And I would argue that it's a paradigm shift, is that if we can move education technology from being a B2B business where technology companies supply their technology to institutions and focus on the consumer, the end user, the student, all of a sudden we've changed things considerably. And what I mean by that is that actually we can now deliver a personal learning journey to every single student everywhere. And we can subsequently deliver personal learning outcomes to each student. And the paradigm shift is if we're moving away from a traditional classroom, I'm not suggesting replace the classroom, but I'm talking about adding value to where we can identify the needs and the challenges of each student, be that around special needs, be that around autism, ADHD and the like, and actually provide resources that configure to the needs of that individual student of every age and every enterprise. All of a sudden we've got something extraordinary. And I'm also extremely optimistic and slightly naive that I don't actually think that's a major problem to achieve. We just need to focus on the objectives and try and get there. So my question is, does blockchain, digital identity, and people owning their own data, is that a significant part of the digital divide solution?
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you so much, Alan. I'm going to turn to Tom again first, because he is, after all, a professor of computing, so he might know more about blockchain than I do.
Thanks, Riva, and thanks, Alan. I mean, I think I probably would say I have healthy skepticism for things like blockchain. I think it's a very, very interesting kind of technology. I think, having done some work with Companies House in the UK around kind of maintaining the integrity of the kind of a public digital and data asset. I think there's potential from distributed ledger technologies in a variety of contexts. I think sometimes it can be a solution in search of a problem. I suppose I would probably answer the question in the sense of a lot of the potential espoused by stuff like public, distributed ledgers, blockchain, underlying blockchain technologies. I think it just reinforces the argument for open public digital and data infrastructure. So if we're talking about things like open educational resources, and there's particularly when you start the potential impact of, say, AI in education and customized bespoke learning, I think there is obviously massive potential for that, but it has to be learner centered. It has to be it has to be auditable. It has to be. I don't think it should be in the hands of a few large private companies. So I think there's huge potential here. But actually, it has to be, it has to be for the citizen, it has to be for the student, and we have to be very clear about governance and transparency and auditability and what happens to the data. But I think there is massive potential.
Can I just very briefly chip
Yeah.
in from a low-income country perspective? I mean, so I won't comment on the higher income country perspectives, but as we've heard in Kenya, 50% of children are just disconnected. They're not online. There is no big data about them to do artificial intelligence with, or no digital identity. I mean, Kenya is trying to bring some of those digital identity things in, but often it just leaves huge swathes of the population locked out because they don't have access to that technology. So I'm very hugely skeptical of anything that is on a per child basis in sub-Saharan Africa, just because those children, anything technological on a per child basis in sub-Saharan Africa, because children just aren't connected. They are not digital. 50% of sub-Saharan Africa just isn't digital, and we have to do something for those children now rather than wait for digital to catch up and then to do something.
Can I respond to Bjorn, if I may?
Sure.
And I would point out, we've been arguing for the better part of 14 years, so this won't come as any surprise to him. I don't agree with you. Having spent a couple of years in China, it's all a matter of one's appetite and one's requirement for technology. In other words, there's an assumption that only wealthy people can have a smartphone or internet connection. I categorically disagree with that. I think if there's an appetite and there's a need and there's a hunger, one of the things that you notice working in Asia is there's a real empathy with learning. There's much better appetite for students who want to improve their outcomes and to get a career and to have an engagement. So I think there's something fundamentally wrong in our society that doesn't allow it to happen. It is not a barrier of devices. It is not even a barrier of internet connectivity. It is an appetite to learn and improve the outcomes for individuals. Now, that could be a naive point of view, but as an optimist, I actually do believe that to be the case.
I mean, I think it's important to be optimistic. And I think, but I would say that, you know, like China and Asia is very different. You know, when, like in sub-Saharan Africa, we're looking at this, you know, the so-called development traps. I mean, that's a slightly tried term and so forth, you know, but basically, you know, the development of South Korea and things like that, of course, they're phenomenally progressed, but it's a very different set of circumstances from the situations that we have in sub-Saharan Africa. I think it's also not about denying anybody those kinds of rights and, you know, access to technology, access to devices, but like, unfortunately, we're sort of in a position where we have to prioritize which human rights to grant first, you know, and I think when you look at the economy of it, what you could actually do for a given amount of money that actually has the potential to reach all children, then, you know, the one device per child is just, it just doesn't work economically right now. It might work in 5 years or in 10 years, but, you know, there's an education need right now that, you know, needs to be met. So yes, but we have argued about it. We should maybe argue about it some more over a coffee.
But you made the point. You made the point I'd like to confirm is that if you look at chatbot technology, which can be delivered on a very simple device, the ability to deliver digital engagement and pedagogy through a chatbot environment is a route to market which is extremely cost effective and is beginning to evolve. But again, a much deeper debate to be had.
Yeah, and one in 10 people, I would say, 1 in 10 people in Turkana County in Kenya have a radio. 1 in 10 households have a radio. You know, never mind, you know. But yes, I mean, things will happen. I think chatbots, by the way, I think are a really interesting technology. We're working with Translators Without Borders, where they're looking at sort of, you know, chatbots and Hausa and things like that, which has been very popular. So I do think that there is a lot of mileage in those kinds of technologies, chatbots in particular.